You're listening to The Tom Kelly Show, the home of personal growth and fun. This is what I like to call a personal growth podcast. I'm a mess. You might be too. And I am on this podcast talking about how I am trying to not be a mess and elevate my life. And I hope you join me for the journey. Across the board on social media as Tom Kelly Show. I want you to subscribe to the YouTube Tom Kelly Show. And I know this sounds redundant, but subscribe to the audio version of this podcast, friends. That's at TomKellyShow.com. And I'm on all of your favorite podcasting apps. And the reason why I ask you to subscribe there is I don't trust the algorithm. I don't trust any of these big media companies. But you know what I do trust? You, my listener. Come look for me whenever you can find me. And right now I have some big opinions to share. And I want you to join me on
The Tom Kelly Show.
That's it. I don't even want the music to be too distracting from a serious topic, friends. Louis C.K., stand-up comedian. Did he deserve a Grammy? Now, what does that topic have anything to do with Tom Kelly and the Tom Kelly Show? Well, you could say, well, Tom's a stand-up comedian. He should be talking about other stand-up comics. I think related to the core human mission of this podcast, talking about Louis C.K. and cancel culture today relates to forgiveness. What are the criteria for forgiveness? Actually, is it what is the criteria or what are the criteria? I feel like there are criteria because there's a lot of things you have to do to be forgiven in my book. What are the criteria for being forgiven and what's the criteria for getting a Grammy and what about Hollywood? We talk about this Will Smith going on and all the big fancy people getting awards. The double standard of Hollywood and stuff. Listen, and let's talk about the double standard of myself. It is probably pretty damn stupid of me to talk about Louis C.K., his sexual crimes, and his comedy talent on a podcast. I think I'm small enough that I'm under the radar of cancel culture, but let's face it. I said this about Will Smith when he got the standing ovation, despite decking a comedian in front of full view of the globe. All right. Everybody in that room was afraid to be the only one sitting because they did not want to be cast as thinking against the grain. They did not want to be the only one not cast in the next Will Smith musical. Or whatever TV show he produces next. Okay. Nobody wanted to be the one cast as well. I had the opinion that's contrary to the herd. And listen, me right now, talking about Louis C.K. in public, does this burn me from working with Louis C.K.'s friends? Listen, how many people are going to judge whatever my opinion is just based on the little graphic I put on the episode art? How many people judged his album without listening to it? How many people, and the good news is I've done a lot of my comedy research, but the bottom line is it's scary to have an opinion because I have a strong opinion on Louis C.K., which notice how I'm stretching out, giving it to you right now. My strong opinion, I'll give you in a second. But my opinion about having an opinion is my opinion is not strong enough to endear myself to Louis C.K., nor is it probably strong enough to endear myself to women who, really have dealt with sexual assault. The problem with going up the middle is you make enemies on both sides. Rehashing my understanding of what Louis C.K. did is Louis C.K. was a nerdy guy, nerdy comedian. Okay. One day he starts becoming successful and beautiful, funny women start surrounding themselves with him at TV shows, also probably at comedy gigs on the road. All right. Suddenly he has female attention and kinks. And he asks women with whom he is in show business, would you mind watching me play solo, masturbate? It's wrong on a lot of levels. Now, I'm probably too much of a prude. But I think Louis C.K.'s big, I would never do that. I mean, listen, Mama Kelly, Tom and Agatha Kelly raised a better man than that. And I'm an awkward human being. I don't want to justify anything Louis C.K. did. But I do want to spread the blame out onto not just him. I do have a problem with the first. What did Louis do wrong? Louis, God bless the man, didn't realize he was at work. Probably didn't realize a lot of these women weren't flirting with him. They were making pretty eyes at his career, not at him as a human being or a man. You know, I've had it too, where people love me for whom I am standing next to, for the TV shows I am working at. But there's that moment where you realize, Tom, they're lusting for your career, not for you, Tom. And Louis C.K. did not have the presence of mind to do that. And frankly, in an environment where we are supposed to elevate men and women, you know, he failed. And a man who I think deep down is, I don't want to call him a feminist, but I think he is, he was a very imperfect feminist. He was imperfectly growing. If you watch the later episodes of his show, like I remember one episode where he was talking about being a lonely 48-year-old man, and yet he wouldn't date an overweight woman. And he looked like the fool and exposed that, you know, I mean, there is something to his art. You know, he built a sitcom or a comedy show around Tig Notaro, who's a comic I love, who's also on Star Trek. You know, so we get into one, what's the problem? It's not just Louis C.K. And we're going to talk about whether or not he deserved a Grammy or whether or not we should forgive him in the next minute or so. First, I do have a problem with comedy culture. There's a comic who I admired in my early days, Jen Kirkman. Her Twitter has been, and her podcast has been all about what she calls rape culture in the comedy scene. I find that word strong, and I don't even know if I truly understand the definition of rape culture, but I will say this is not a business I would want my nieces to pursue, and not in the way I came up in it. And even the way I'm coming up in it now, you go to some bars and there's still the creepy, there's the creepy bartender, the creepy manager, and my problem with comedy as a whole is the first rungs of comedy is all booze and alcohol, and you're supposed to stay at comedy clubs late and keep drinking and hope that somebody likes you enough to put you on stage or take you on the road to their next gig. And, it doesn't bring out the purest of people. And listen, one, it's the comedy scene's problem. And two, I blame America. We glorify Saturday Night Live and the drug using heyday of Saturday Night Live. Hey, that guy was doing drugs. Were you all doing coke writing all night long? We glorify it. We glorify it. And then we wonder when somebody whips a dick out and asks a woman to watch him masturbate. We're not enabling a good scene here. It's not a scene I want my nieces to be a part of. And frankly, I don't think I want my nephews to be a part of it either. It's not a good scene. And then when you get to the television world, there's a lot of people not speaking up. There's a lot of people not yelling out, "The emperor has no clothes," because the person who yells out, "The emperor has no clothes," generally gets pushed aside and doesn't get the next promotion, doesn't get the next job. I have been pretty, I've never seen anything as bad as Louis C.K. Let's get this out of the way. But I have seen moments where I'm like, that person could do better. That person's doing something a little bit wrong. And I've spoken up for it. And I've been told, hey, Tom, shut your mouth. You know, we're in a business, every business environment. We do not reward the whistleblowers. We do not reward the Superman and the Clark Kents. We don't reward the honest superheroes. We're all up climbing, even the ones we love. You know, someone once said this about somebody who I admired on television. The line was, that man or woman is a network news person. They did not get to the top of the ladder by being a good person. And you're right. You don't get to the top of the ladder by saying, well, Bob, you need to work a little harder. And, maybe we're being a little too hard on Elaine. You know? So Louis C.K., do we forgive him? And does he deserve a Grammy? Two different things. And this is a big one that we can explore on the Tom Kelly Show going down the road. What are the criteria for forgiveness? And I asked this once of a celebrity. What's the criteria for forgiving Kathy Griffin? And the line was, you have to acknowledge you did something wrong. You got to show you're sorry. You got to shut up. And then you got to lay low for a while and hope that people forgive you. What are my criteria for forgiving a celebrity, or frankly, anybody who wrongs you? You know, what's the criteria for forgiving an ex? What's the criteria for forgiving your brothers or sisters or cousins or uncles and aunts and moms and dads? And for me, it's one, acknowledging you did something wrong, genuinely showing remorse. Criteria 3 could be a penance. So that's a very Catholic and yet non-Catholic approach to forgiveness. And then you have to sort of stick to those 3 things. Louis C.K.'s album, kind of, if you listen to his jokes, he kind of plays the I'm the victim card. And that does not sit well with me. I will compare him quickly and briefly to a comedian I am working with a lot. I have been doing a lot of shows with Franken. I don't know the man well. He is pleasant when he comes in. I bring him on stage and he's gone by the time I get off stage. He was expelled or resigned from the Senate for being caught in pictures of him with a beauty queen on a USO tour of him holding the boobs up or holding the hands on the boobs and being sexually harassing. I don't know Al Franken well, but he's not a man who's good with women. You just have that vibe of he's an awkward man. And listen, he said sorry. He shut up. And you know what he does when you see him perform? He does not talk about the incident at all. Why? Because you don't see him then backpedaling. Kathy Griffin horrified me with the picture she did with the fake head of Donald Trump, where it looked like she chopped Trump's head off and it was all bloody. That horrified me. I actually like Kathy Griffin. She's been kind to me twice. That picture horrified me. Where did Kathy Griffin go wrong on the forgiveness train? She keeps saying why she's right and why Trump is awful. No, you did something horrible. And when you say, I'm sorry, but isn't he a jerk? That's not, I'm sorry. It becomes a justification. Or I'm sorry, but haven't I suffered enough? No, you just shut up about it. Put it away. Don't talk about it. Now, the Louis C.K. album that the Grammys gave him an award for. And honestly, man, it's a good album. I don't know if it's Louis C.K.'s best album. There are some brilliant morsels of truth. There are some brilliant exposés on the hypocrisy of the American man and woman. There are, there's a great bit on the hypocrisy of whether or not how we use the R word. And then, it's funny, I guess the rest of the album's kind of forgettable. I listened to it yesterday. He talked about his Obama knowing about his kinks, and that how exposed he felt with his kinks and the things we have. Again, I guess what I wanted from him was either for him to shut up on that issue altogether, or for him to be a little more sorry and human. And he didn't satisfy that criteria. But that aside, the album's really good. You can listen to it if you pay for Apple Music. You can listen to it without paying for it directly, without buying it. And it's a good album if you like dark comedy. And I'm kind of hot and cold. I've never truly loved Louis C.K., but when I love him, I love him. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. When I love him, I love him. There's a bit of him on Conan O'Brien talking about the miracle of air flight that everybody should talk about. Everybody should listen to. And so you get into it. Did the album deserve a Grammy? There was new talent there. Who are the other Grammy comedy nominees? I should have looked that up really quick. I haven't listened to the other albums, so I can't tell you who is the best, who is not. But I think there is a hypocrisy right now of maybe if somebody's awful, you don't necessarily give them the highest award ever. You don't give them the same award that Whoopi Goldberg has won blank years ago. You don't give them the same award that, it's funny. I don't even pay attention to this category. I really don't. I'm an awful comedian. This is why I'm just podcasting for you friggin' 200 people and a little bit of a YouTube people. I mean, maybe I'm not the best expert on what this should be, but I think, listen, if you want to, if Hollywood is going to stand up for morals, don't reward your own people who are amoral. I mean, listen, the Oscars is the one I'm a little more knowledgeable about. It always felt wrong that the guy who pled guilty to raping a teenage girl was still getting Best Picture nominations because he was working across the ocean. That just felt wrong. Woody Allen, who was not found guilty and not charged with molesting his 7-year-old kid, he married his own stepdaughter. Maybe that's a little bit creepy. Maybe we don't reward that. And where's the distinction between the art and the person? I think at a certain point, man, if you reward artists who are a-holes, there's no encouragement. There's no incentive to be a good person. On the other side, I don't believe in cancel culture. I do believe Louis C.K. has and deserves a chance at redemption. I do think and it's funny, there's a lot of comedians and people who have been slightly canceled doing stand-up right now. Al Franken, who is getting ready to mount a national tour, I believe. He's at the Comedy Cellar, the West Side Comedy Club in stand-up New York quite a bit. Who else is on the radar? Jeremy Piven doing stand-up all around. TJ Miller, and again, I don't even know what half of these people have been canceled for anymore. I just know they're rebuilding and they're starting in the comedy clubs. And I think the comedy clubs is the first step on the road to forgiveness. Should we forgive Louis C.K.? For me personally, he has not yet satisfied my conditions for forgiveness, but I do think he could be forgivable if he gets out of his own bubble. And again, maybe you need a woman to answer that one. But for me, amongst friends, by myself podcasting, with nobody to gently correct me, he could be forgivable. He's not there yet. He has not satisfied my criteria. Category 2, did he deserve a Grammy? I don't know. Okay, so it took 20 minutes on the podcast. It took 20 minutes for me to say, I have no opinion anymore. I should have just followed my instincts and not recorded this show and just talked about my dating life instead. No, but here's the deal. Louis C.K. and everybody on earth, and I say this as a Christian, everybody is forgivable, but there are criteria you have to meet to earn forgiveness. You have to be worthy of being forgiving. And it's not just being hilarious. And did he deserve a Grammy? There were a couple of great truths in that album that exposed the hypocrisy of Americans. But there has to be other stuff that was good too. And, you know, like I have a stand-up joke that I'll do in crappy clubs. Tom, are you afraid of being canceled for having a bad opinion? And I say, I've already been canceled. This is what being canceled looks like. Podcasting in your kitchen is damn close to being canceled, even though I've done nothing to get canceled for. I want to add one more thought on Louis C.K. Maybe there is some good that can come out of his awful behavior. Maybe there are people out there who will, and again, America's turned me into a do better Karen. But yeah, listen, comedy club, even if they're only paying $25 for a spot, when you're with another comic, that's a coworker, man. Soak that in. Big ending of the show. Anytime you think you like the Tom Kelly Show, share it with a friend. Thank you for taking this journey with me, friends. New episodes on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And I think we have a hell of an adventure coming up. Until tomorrow, good night, New York.